What if the things that teach us the most about money have very little to do with money? Maybe they're the things we've watched our families do when there wasn't enough of it, the things we chased when we finally started making it, the things we sacrificed while trying to build more of it. And eventually, the realization that some of the most valuable things in our lives can't actually be accumulated at all. My guest today, Mike Milligan, has spent nearly 3 decades in the financial industry. He's an entrepreneur, financial planner, author, educator, podcast host, husband, and father. But long before any of those titles, Mike was an 11-year-old kid sitting at his grandmother's kitchen table counting the money she made selling collared sandwiches. And I'm really interested in the thread between 11-year-old Mike and the man who chased success, and now the Mike approaching 50s who's redefining that success and what it even means. Because somewhere in between survival, achievement, presence, our definition of enough has a tendency to change. Welcome to the show.
Excited to be here. This is going to be freaking an amazing conversation.
I'm very excited. I want to get started at your grandmother's kitchen table. Your grandfather, from what I gathered, he gets diagnosed with cancer, which made him unable to work. It put your grandmother in a unique position. She didn't have a business plan or some grand entrepreneurial vision. There was a problem in front of her, and she figured out a way to solve it. And then there was you, aged 11. What was your vantage point like then?
Well, I mean, I obviously saw tears, right? I saw grief played out. I mean, I didn't know my grandparents' story until close to the end of my granny's life. They were always very secretive about like how they met. They wanted to live in the present, not the past. Um, but but during that time when I was 11 years old, right? I mean, I loved him. He was the man in my life. Like he was rock solid, stern, didn't say a lot of few words. You could never leave his presence without kissing him on the forehead. You could never leave without saying I love you. My pa was, well, I mean, he was like my best friend when I didn't even know what a best friend was. I mean, we didn't go ride bicycles together or trade baseball cards, but we had the conversations that the young version of me needed to hear, right? About telling the truth and loving, and I saw how he loved my granny. But it was a different vantage point because, I didn't know that was the first death I ever had to deal with in my life. But I just knew that somebody I loved was no longer there or was no longer going to be there. And I had no clue what we were doing. Like I had no idea what selling collard sandwiches meant to the survival of my family or what it was like for my granny to stay up long hours at night to cook and, do something that in reality, Alexa, she did not want to do that. This is what I've come to learn is like granny did not want to sell collard sandwiches. Granny wanted to stay married, right? To have her husband around. She wanted another 30 years with him. She did not want the life that was thrown on her. But also what I learned from her is that the you've heard the saying when life throws you lemons, make lemonade. Well, I mean, that's cute, right? I saw it from a standpoint when life kicks you in the freaking gut, it's how you stand up and hit life back. And that's what she did is, they didn't have a 401k or a Roth IRA or a huge bank account or a stack of CDs. They had a life that required income, and that income was gone because first of his back injury and then his cancer diagnosis. And so she had to do something that was, now looking back on it, was radical. She did something she knew how to do well, cook, but then she took what she cooked and then she kind of mass produced it. And she sold that sandwich for $5 at a time when you could get a Big Mac for $1. Right? I mean, she sold, like my granny does not, she never knew in her life who Louis Vuitton was or Hermes, right? She was just a Southern woman, but she was selling a premium product because people loved her, they felt sorry for her, and they wanted to care for her. And she's like my ultimate business coach. Listen, I love reading about Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, titans of industry, the modern titans of industry. I love reading about them. I love reading about JP Morgan and the Vanderbilts and all them. But my granny was a hell of a businesswoman, right? But innovated because she was desperate. The phone bill still going. She needed to eat. She needed to pay the taxes on the home they lived in. She still needed to have gas. She still wanted to do some things in life. And so she was desperate and she did the only thing she knew how to do, cook. And that's how and so my vantage point as an 11-year-old version of myself versus an almost 50-year-old version, they're very radically different, but I often think back to that time in my life when I have to make a difficult decision on our Inc. 5,000 company, our 8-figure revenue, and think like, well, what would my granny have done?
Hmm.
And that kind of common sense, small town wisdom of what she did during that time has kept me hungry and driven to keep being better than anybody else in the industry I'm in.
I noticed you mentioned people there wanted to show love to your granny. They were already connected to her. So, do you think that a large part of why she did so well, other than just the pure desperation of it all, was also because of the relationships she had built with other people?
Well, I mean, the collard sandwich was a hell of a good sandwich.
Mhm.
Right? It was, like in Southern America at the time, right? A well cooked meal. I mean, she was delivering basically she was delivering a home cooked meal into the lunch pail, right? To construction workers. She was taking a home cooked meal and putting it at the roadside stand. She was in that home cooked meal she would take to fairs and festivals. So she brought the home cooked meal, the feeling of being at the dining room table to people's mouth at a time when they were not getting that. Her biggest competition at that time, I said, was the dollar cheeseburger, the Big Mac, but it was also probably the ham sandwich, right? Because that's probably what most people packed in their lunch pail. Back in the late '80s and '90s, people didn't go out to eat for lunch every day; they brought their lunch. So that's what she was competing with. I think so. I think her realizing, like, obviously, people loved her because they knew him. People in the construction industry knew his name, right? They knew her name because of him. And so, by association of the hardworking reputation, being a widow, right? That was another thing. Being all of a sudden suddenly alone, there was another avenue there. But then just the fact that she delivered a good bite every time. That was unique, that was different than what everybody else was doing at the time, I think is why she was successful.
People pay $1 for a Big Mac, but then they take it in this wrapper and they eat it in their vehicle or on the side of the road. She brought the home to the corner. And I think people paid not only for the premium product, but the premium experience of that.
Yeah, and the other thing she taught me too is she showed up right on time. So, like, what she would do is she knew all of these foremen at these different construction sites. And so what she would do is say, "Tell me when you're gonna break for lunch." And what she would try to do is she would, and I got to see this firsthand in the summers when I was not in school or like a day off, is she would show up right on time and she would say, "Come and get it, boys." Right? So she would be there ready, and but what she would do is she would have one lined up at 11:30, she'd have another one lined up at 12:15, and she'd have another one lined up at 1. And so she was selling 30, 40 of these a day, and then she'd go back and do it again, and that, at the time, we'd think, well, and she only made $200, right? They're like, "That's not a lot of money." I'm talking about 1991, 1992, that was a lot of money, and so she was making $1,000 a week. Well, at the time, minimum wage was $3.40 or something like that. She was crushing it. But she would show up on time. They would just easily hand over that $5 bill. Yeah.
I love that. 1991. Before anyone taught you what money was worth, what did your grandmother teach you about what money was for?
Well, man, she told me to count every penny, nickel, and dime, and even cleaned them too. I don't know if most people don't know this, right? Because we don't keep coins around anymore. And so my granny taught me how to clean money. Like, money was something of value. We would clean it, and most people don't remember this either, but you could take they would have these rollers, coin rollers, where you could put 50 pennies in it. Dimes, you could put 50 dimes, 40 nickels, 40 quarters, and turn them into dollar bills. But my granny taught me, you count all of this and then you account for it. You know where it is. And then you make sure that you spend less than what you bring in. And she saved her money in a very unique way. Um, Today we would think this is ridiculous, but like, she would save her money in Folgers coffee cans unless they were $20 bills or higher. the $20 bills or higher, the 20, 50s, or 100, she would wrap them like a bank teller would, and then she'd put them in tinfoil. And then on the tinfoil, she would take a black Sharpie marker and write liver, and she would put it in the freezer. And I used to always think, why in the world? Why? But she told me, she said, hey, listen, if we ever get robbed, nobody's stealing the liver.
She
I
knew
mean,
some tricks.
right. Like wisdom, right? Like in the worst possible time, nobody's taking the liver. The liver's because the liver has some benefit to you, right? But not the benefit, not the instant satisfaction type of right that like a robber would look for. And that just that simple principle is like nobody's stealing the liver. I can equate that to a financial plan, right? You got to have an emergency fund and you got to put it away, right? Because it's there only when you need it. But you got to put it in a place that's going to be good for you, right?
Out of
But
sight, out of
also
mind.
out of sight, out of mind, right? It's the liver. It's the liver fund.
I like that, the liver fund. What I find so interesting about her story is that today we have this entire culture built around entrepreneurship. We talk about becoming founders, taking risks, and building something of our own. But for a lot of people throughout history, entrepreneurship wasn't necessarily an aspiration, it was a resourcefulness or a necessity, like in your grandmother's case. So she became an entrepreneur because she had to. Do you think some of our greatest ingenuity comes from having fewer choices?
I mean, I think the light bulb is one of the greatest inventions ever, right? But could somebody really could somebody in today's world go through the number of failures that Benjamin Franklin went through to create something as great as that? Right? We look for like a get rich quick thing, right? The innovation now has to be for think about what the world needs in 2035, 2040. Most people don't have that kind of forethought and the discipline to stay that far. But I mean, that's what if you really want to be, if you want to be a billionaire, right? I mean, and you know, there's all these clubs out there of entrepreneurs who say we're the future billionaires club, and they're in every city in America, and it's entrepreneurs who get together with aspirational goals to be extremely wealthy and create a solution to problems that people have. That's what entrepreneurism is now right now. But at the heart of it, though, you have to solve problems, and that's just not what most entrepreneurs do. I read I was recently reading on entrepreneurs, and I heard a coach say that there was a guy who wanted to create a wrinkle-free workout shirt.
Wow.
Like, why do you want a wrinkle-free workout shirt? Do you go to the gym, Alexa?
I do go to the gym.
Do you care if your clothes are wrinkle-free or not?
Hardly.
Yeah, me neither. Right? You want to talk about solving a problem that's just not needed?
I just care that they stay on while I'm working out.
Right, right, right. That we don't show parts
Yeah.
of our body that nobody else wants to see,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But like that's somebody that like is trying to solve a problem that nobody has a need for. And unfortunately, like in the entrepreneur world right now, there's a lot of people who are trying to figure that out. I saw something recently at a hotel room behind the dresser came up this plug. It had 6 plugs on it. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. And so I went over to touch it and it moved. And like literally, and when I looked behind there, the plug was down behind the dresser, but it was this extension piece coming off. It was plugged into the plug that created an extension. I was like, shit, that's a good idea. Like, who did that? Because that person is probably a millionaire, multimillionaire at this point. Right now, that's a good idea. That's something we need. We don't need wrinkle-free workout shirts. That's entrepreneurs, right? You know, you just got to create. You got to find a real problem that really needs to be solved, and then get busy doing that.
I find there's a lot of people that come at it with this alternative relationship to money and wealth, and they look at it through the lens of scarcity, which we kind of build a relationship to money as early as we can remember speaking about money, hearing our parents say, no, like we can't afford that, or hey, let's put some money away for a rainy day. Did you find growing up around financial scarcity make you good with money or afraid of not having enough of it?
You know, I was never afraid of not having money because my grandparents and my mother were extremely good to me. I always had food to eat. I always had a bed to sleep in. I mean, I look back at it now, right? And I had a mattress that had like a divot in it. And I didn't know that the mattress was not supposed to have a divot in it. I didn't know I grew up poor, right? I just had somewhere to sleep. I had a roof over my head. And now what I realized is that mattress was probably 25 years old when I started using it. And today I would never settle for something like that in my life. But as a kid, I did not know I was poor. I had no clue. because I was loved. There's a lot of people that, and what you're talking about, right, is like money scripts like that, those first memories of money that give us anxiety about money. And I don't have like a bad relationship with money, even though I grew up extremely poor. I mean, we were on welfare, right? We had cheese delivered to our house. That picture of me helping my grandmother at her dining room table, when I tell that story or people hear it, they view their dining room table. They don't view mine. My dining room table was in a 70 by 10 single wide trailer where the kitchen was 10 feet wide, but 7 feet. It was small. With like the dining room table was a small round table, like in the corner of that couldn't come to the center of that room because there wouldn't have been enough room.
Wow.
Like it was tiny. And we were separated from the outside by a little piece of metal and some plexi wood that if a strong wind came through, the house shook a little bit. We were poor, dirt poor. Uh, but I don't think of like being poor because there was always a little bit of money every day in my life. I was either cleaning a penny, I was counting dollars that my granny brought in the day before. I was accounting for those. There was always money kind of present around. It just wasn't $100 bills. It didn't show up in high end cars. It didn't show up in like huge vacations. It didn't show up in brand new clothes anytime we wanted to, or Amazon packages being delivered to our house. But I do look back on it and realize now we were poor.
I think a lot of people can relate to that, but at the same time, it's like you said, you had an abundance of community and family. And so it's your first time on this earth. It's not like you're thinking it's unusual if a baby's sleeping in a laundry basket.
Right.
It's you don't know any better. So I think it's
Yeah.
the world at large that changes our viewpoint. And then this, especially North America, the overconsumption of things.
Yeah. And Lex, I think now, right, because the way social media presents how life is, I think that there's a lot of kids that maybe even grow up in the same town I did with doing the same things I did who realize that their life is completely different than another kid. And I think it was a blessing to grow up when I did without social media ever present. Um, because now what you see um, comparison, you see anxiety, depression, you know, insecurity like through the roof with young kids these days because they see it everywhere. They see what other people have everywhere.
If your granny could look at the world as it is today, what do you think she'd remind us that doesn't matter nearly as much as we think it does?
Granny would, if she were in the kitchen of that little trailer that we grew up in on this coming Sunday, for instance, she would still be in there making Sunday dinner for us all, and she would basically tell everybody, you know, put those phones down. You're here with me now. You're here with your family. She would throw out a football and say, "Get out there and run, right? Get out there and be with each other." She would not put up with the things that the world views as time consumers now. She wouldn't put up with that. She also wouldn't put up with laziness. She was a great delegator before I knew what delegation was. Like if she saw you not doing something, she'd be like, "Hey, go out there and I need 2 heads of collards." And I knew at the age of 6 how to like go out there and chop collards and not waste anything. I knew how to pick potatoes. I knew how to snap beans. She always knew how to keep me busy with something that helped her, but also kept me off certain things.
That's a good takeaway. I think the viewers have this good picture of what life was like at 11, Granny's table, how that transpired. And then somewhere along the way, money goes from something you're observing to something now you're earning. So survival can become security, security can become ambition. And then ambition has this interesting habit of continually moving the finish line. I've always wondered whether our external circumstances can change much faster than our internal relationship with scarcity does, or even just like the overconsumption and the stuff we sort of brought in of today's way of doing things. When you finally started making money, did it actually make you feel financially safe? Or did the definition of enough just keep moving?
I didn't know, I didn't, in my life, I didn't have modeled like this how to handle money. Money was always there. It was there to serve a purpose to pay bills. But nobody ever modeled for me this whole idea of saving or investing or although my granny and pa owned their house, the trailer, they bought it for like 1,500 bucks back in the day. And but like nobody else in my family really owned. They all rented. And I didn't know that renting was different than owning until I really went to college and then I got into the workforce. And even in the workforce, I didn't have had an academic knowledge of what money was. I knew things like compound interest and I knew what a Roth was, a traditional IRA. I knew what a mortgage, what life insurance. I knew some terms, but I didn't know like how to apply them. It took really like being in banks, insurance companies, Wall Street firms for me to be, to apply things to people's lives well. I mean, I look back on my career and I think, man, 27 years ago, what was I doing helping people manage money? I was like, I want to go back and apologize to people for like things I said in the past or things I didn't know. But boy, life wouldn't have been as fun if I knew it all when I was 22 years old because when those early days of my career, I just outworked and out relationship people. Every big bank and insurance company I worked at, I was always the top performer, not because I knew more, just because I worked harder than anybody else. And like I didn't know the word no. So when somebody was saying no, I'd still show up. Almost to the point of like, I'm sure some people were like, I mean, is this guy just dumb? Because I'd still show up. And when I found somebody with money, when I found somebody that met my ideal client profile, I just stayed around. I would show up where they are, right? If they told me that their kid had a T-ball game at Great Neck Park, I would show up at Great Neck Park and be like, "Hey, man, let's get a hot dog together." And they're like, "What are you doing?" Right? Like, I'm just here, just here to learn about you. That's all I am. But what I did is I brought this amazing tenacity of relationship skills that, I think some of the best sales coaches in the world would be like, man, you're great at demonstrating my philosophy. Well, all I'm demonstrating is common sense. Like if you want to do business with somebody, you just be where they are. So when they need you, you can help them. And then you just gotta and don't cheat them, be fair, right? Tell them how much you get paid. Just like some basic common sense stuff. But when I realized that the inverse was happening at the corporate level only cared banks, and it's just true still today. 1999, 2000 to 2010, it was all true. Banks, financial companies, they only care about their shareholders and how much they're paying out in bonuses and are they meeting Wall Street's expectations. They don't care about your vacation. There was just a story that popped out in August that said the CEO of Accenture, one of the big consulting firms in this country, asked all of their employees to forego their August vacations in the name of creating more revenue for their shareholders.
So the shareholders can stay on vacation.
Exactly. And here's the thing, right, that I say now that I'm almost 30 years in the business, what I say to people is there's somebody who this summer, it's the last time they could go on vacation before their kid goes to college. For others, it's like the last time they could have gone on vacation with a parent that won't make it to next year. Right? It's a vacation that could have saved a marriage. It's a vacation that it's time that maybe people needed to avoid a mental breakdown. What that CEO asked people to do was sacrifice for who? Freaking Wall Street. And that's the thing that drives me crazy about this industry is that, or just America in general, it's all about the freaking bottom line. Yet we only have one life to live. And that life could end like that. It could be done. And that's why I think that when you find yourself in a situation where somebody's asking you to give up something of meaning and importance, you need to change your scenario. And I think that's why there's more entrepreneurs. They're trying to take control of their time and not be made made to feel guilty if they want to go on a trip or sleep in or put a pool in their backyard. It's your life. Go live it.
The newer generations, they don't put up with stuff like that. they're kind of just like, you know what, I'm out of here. If I'm not being treated the way I want to be treated, I'm done. And a lot of us, we kind of grin and bear it and overextend ourselves and give all of the blood, sweat, and tears to these companies. And we can't even get a Christmas party every year.
Right.
So it's kind of the balancing act of, you obviously need a job to survive. What advice would you give then to not just the leaders that are up and coming that will eventually be in these roles where they have the pressure from shareholders, but also just to remember to take care of your people, and then the people coming into these scenarios in the workforce, the boots on the ground, what can they do to bridge that gap as well so that they can keep employment but also be happy and self-fulfilled?
Well, we sometimes forget thought leaders that come before us because they become a little too old for like the current generation. So like maybe somebody who's 35 and younger may have never heard of the name Zig Ziglar, but Zig Ziglar is a guy who said if you make enough people's dream, I'm paraphrasing this, but he basically said if you make enough people's dreams and hopes come true, you'll have all of your dreams and hopes. And so if you treat others the way you want to be treated, all he did is take the golden rule, apply a new spin on it, and made millions of dollars off of it. That's all he did. But like, so new leaders just, if you get to know the people you're leading, if you treat them with empathy, if you show care, genuine care about what their life is like, most of them will do anything for you. If you don't come down hard on them, listen, the people in my companies make mistakes every day. They make every day. And so mistakes are just an opportunity to get better. It's not an opportunity to punish. Like if you continue to make the same mistake over and over again, maybe you're not in the right job, right? But you will find that out and you'll go find something right for you. But I'm not going to punish people for continuing making mistakes because I don't know what happened before they came to work and what's happening at home after work. I have no idea. Some people think that their job's the most stressful thing. Sometimes it's their relationship with their significant other. Sometimes it's a kid that's acting out. Sometimes it's a mother who's going through cancer or a father that's on a deathbed, right? And you're feeling that burden and you come to work for the for to escape it. The last thing you need is a manager who's got their thumb on your neck because I mean it's just so you don't know what people are going through and you need to find a way to empathize with them. Because if you don't, there's options everywhere. There's options to work. They may not be good options, but if my company, One Oak Financial, failed tomorrow, I'd be fine. Like I've built multiple 8-figure businesses. I could get up and do this again. It's the people though in my company that maybe couldn't do that. And maybe they would lose their home or lose their car or tuition can't be paid for a kid in college. And that kid would have to come home and go to a community college. That's so like to me, this whole Zig Ziglar thing is make enough people's wishes, hopes, and dreams come true, and you'll have everything you want. That's how we run our company, and that's how. And the really successful companies don't run their company like with a slave-driven mentality. They run it with a compassion and empathy, with the care that's needed. And that's what I would tell. If you manage people, do that. If you are looking to start a business and hire employees, do that.
It's interesting because a lot of leaders and managers think that caring is sticking this massive poster on the wall that says, here are our team values as a company. And one of them will say empathy on it. But if you're not exemplifying these qualities, you're not going to actually live into your values. So your integrity is completely shot. And I would want to know, first and foremost, how do you demonstrate that?
And demonstrating is something that takes a little bit of time. You can have fans or testimonials about culture, but culture can change like that. The wrong hire, the wrong promise not fulfilled, right? A lashing out because revenue is missed, or we're disappointed. We just have to make sure that we keep our emotions under control, make wise decisions as business owners, and then just realize that there's people going through stuff all over the place outside of the walls of this building, and you know and just and give them some grace when something comes up. But at the end of it, the goal is for people to go out and live kind of a amazing life because of what they accomplish in work, not the other way around. Not have an amazing career and a life that sucks. It's to have a one of a kind life because of what you do here, the tool of having a job.
I see a bridge here to It's not just what our job can rob us of, but if we're grinding constantly, it doesn't actually mean we're present for our lives. At what point did being good at making a living start competing with being good at living?
Well, I have definitely in my past as being like an owner operator of a company, I've definitely owned a job in my life where I basically was the owner of a 70-hour work week. And I created it for myself. I didn't look to have employees do multiple things to leverage their skills so that I could have freedom. And now I own a company that if I were to go out today and die in a car wreck, One Oak Financial would keep going. It would just have its vision i- is greater now than Mike Milligan. And I think that's what as an owner operator, as an entrepreneur, as an enterprising entrepreneur, whatever you're going to call yourself, whatever you are, I think that's what you want is you want your business to outlive you. Now, for some people, that business outliving you means you sell your company. And when you sell your company, you can then take the proceeds of that, go do what you want to, but then somebody continues to go.
I think another branch off of that question is what the rat race robs from us about being present in our day to day. You can be basically succeeding in one category while quietly struggling in another. And eventually something forces the two versions of your life to basically be in the same room. Like you can no longer ignore this. What is something the financial industry taught you about success that life eventually forced you to unlearn?
Well, my early career in the financial industry is that, it taught you that, especially working in the high net worth world, is that a rich person always wants you to be available to their needs. And that's what people are still being taught, right? In big banks, insurance companies, and Wall Street, right? They keep their phones tethered to them at all times. And if a very wealthy person will call at 7 o'clock on a Friday night, not to talk to you, just to get something out of their head, we have trained them that they can call and get us. But what we should be doing is letting them go to voicemail because all they want to do is leave a message. And then we've also figured out that every email needs an immediate response. And it's just not the case. People will wait for good advice on your terms. And that's the thing that most young people, new professionals, even people starting new businesses don't get is like, this is not, we don't, our life should not be on demand all the time. It should be there should be boundaries in place. We've done a really good job of helping our folks create boundaries. I create boundaries, and so if you're great at business in your personal life, the time for yourself sucks. You're not well balanced. You're just asking for professional burnout. You're asking for divorce. You're asking for unhealthy relationships. You have to have a well balanced life. And when you have a well balanced life, you can ask like a significant other or a spouse to give a little bit for work because they know on the other side of it, they're going to get a lot. They're going to get those extra days in Switzerland, or they're going to get to, in my case, move to Puerto Rico and live on an island that is just absolutely amazing. I'm blessed to have a really good business, but I'm really blessed to have a really exceptional life. And I can't have one without the other. If I didn't have a good life, I wouldn't have a good business. And if we didn't have a good business, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I really wanted to do.
100%. And being present to your experience in that and understanding that your health and wealth are in tandem. You've also spoken publicly about reaching 350 pounds during a period when relationships and other parts of your life weren't where you wanted them to be. Looking back, was there a story your body was telling you that you weren't ready to listen to yet?
Well, I think my story was telling my mind something that my mind didn't want to hear. And at that, when I reached in 2017, when I reached 2018, when I reached the peak weight, and I mean, I'm 6'4", so I mean, 350 pounds looks big, but it doesn't look like gross. Like,
If
I mean,
I was 350, it would.
I'm not trying to any listener here that's in that state, you could change because I know I did. I changed. I mean, it took a long time to change a consistent. consistently working out, eating better. Like for me, I had to become a pescatarian because that I avoided fast food restaurants. I had to put something on my calendar every day called a workout, and I would go do it. It was an appointment, right? Because I'm very much used to putting appointments on my calendars. Up until 2017, I never put a workout on there. I'd put like every client meeting I have every day. I'd put every after work event on there, but I never put a workout. So I started putting a workout. It became part of my routine. There is, if you have a crazy amount of wealth, but you don't have your health, that money is worthless to you. It could be worth something to kids or a spouse or a charity, but it means nothing to you. And so like when I learned that in 2017, when I right after I turned 40 years old, I learned the biggest that biggest thing, like, because I was having friends that were having heart surgeries, and I had a friend who passed away. I eventually had a brother who passed away in a car wreck, had nothing to do with his health. But like this death thing just hit me, right? Like in the head, like if you don't have this, you don't really have anything.
Exactly. We all have an expiration date. When you built those habits and eventually lost the weight, what changed about you that couldn't be measured on the scale?
I mean, I got better at my job. I mean, that's probably what you want to hear, right? Is I got better at my job. But it was crazy the things that changed. I mean, food tasted better because I was eating better food. I could be more active with my teenage kids at that time. I can get out and do stuff with them. And that was fun to see the smiles on their face when their dad was out kicking their butt on a sports field. I was a better golfer. Vacations were better because instead of having to sit by a pool all day, I could go out and do hikes and I could see different things, right? My gosh, sex was better, right? I mean, everything was better about life. And that's the thing is I could sit here and name, I could give you the answer that like just work was better. But that's not right. Everything was better. People looked at me different. And they looked at me in a way that like, well, man, that guy must be, people that are really healthy are a lot of people look at them like they're more successful. I mean, when you see like a ripped 42-year-old who doesn't have a dad bod, man, that guy must be really successful. And it could be anything. There's a lot of people that are in great shape who don't have two pennies to rub together, right? But just the perception changes of you, and that's the beauty. I mean, that's the thing about having stayed in shape is like even as I'm approaching like 50 now, I can still do things that I couldn't do in my 30s when I was overweight. And so that's why I mean I'm just committed for the rest of my life to keep the workout on my schedule, to eat great, and try to be as healthy as I can.
Well, exactly. And we're taught to sacrifice our health and relationships and time, what we're building, and then use all this money. This is the irony that we make to get them back, which is basically the worst trade deal ever. What do you think people need to pay attention to most then? If their ideal is that time back, what's the number one thing? If you have the company or you have the relationship, the kids, what do we double down with and put the most time into now?
I can only tell you what I'm doing. I have 3 adult kids, Zach, Grace, and Paige. And as opposed to giving them an inheritance when I die, I'm giving them the chance to do things in their 20s I never had a chance to do. Like Grace just spent 3 weeks in South Africa. Paige, when she was graduated high school, didn't want to go to college right away. So she spent a year in Cambodia and Thailand and South Africa and Guatemala. Zach and Haley wanted to go on a cruise. I was like, go. Just here's the card, go.
Mhm.
Right. I want them to build experiences into their life now, why they can go do things. I honestly think that we have kind of flubbed this whole chronological things that we do in life: high school, college, then we go in the workforce, we work until we're 65, then we retire when we don't have the energy or the stamina to go out and do the things that we could have done. We almost should graduate from college. Your graduation gift should be like a 3-year sabbatical to go see the world. And we should fund that because then you can go make your money, right? So like for me, if there were people that are in their 50s, 60s, and they've got kids, you should give them the money now. I mean, keep enough for you to live the rest of your life. But like to me, I mean, what's the difference for me dying with 2 million or 50 million if my kids over that time can, not be in debt, if they can go travel whenever they want to. Now they're not going to sit on a couch and not work. I'm not gonna fund their whole lifestyle. They're still going to work, but if they can go out and do the things that I never had a chance to do, if they could see that, because the more you see of this world, the more you realize you've seen nothing in this world.
For anyone listening that may not have built the same foundation, but they're at that point in their life where they're like, I'm making a pivot. I don't have a lot of cash to give away. How do I live intentionally now?
Man, like my life and your life are totally different. And so what I do, maybe going to Machu Picchu or hiking Rainbow Mountain or going to swim in the Great Barrier Reef or Africa or whatever, for you, it may be like a 2 hour drive up to a state park. Right. And so, like, if you don't have the money to hop on a plane and go somewhere, you probably can get some gas money together and go up there and do that. You could drive down to the Outer Banks and go swimming in the ocean tomorrow, which is beautiful. It's just about creating, because when you see something absolutely gorgeous, or you have an energy filling experience, when you have that, all of a sudden it makes you hungry to do, that's an energy filling experience outside of work. It all of a sudden makes you hungry to do more with work. Like your priorities change. Like it may be that job that you've had that you haven't been happy in, you realize, if I go out and start this on my own, I can make more money so I can go do other things. So it's like one inspires the others. Unfortunately, we look for inspiration in the wrong place sometimes. We look for inspiration for life in our work. And that's not where inspiration comes from. Inspiration comes from our play. Whatever you do on the play side is what should inspire work, not the other way around.
Yeah. As you approach 50, what have you realized you absolutely cannot postpone?
I have this motto in my life called never miss a moment. And it reminds me, and I wake up with that mantra every day. I probably chant it to myself 200 times a day. And it means to me that where you are, be present there. Don't be checking your cell phone. Don't be checking emails when you're supposed to be somewhere in a conversation. But it also says to me, don't miss the opportunity to do something. Never miss a moment to me means, or what I want is to go do these things, because we're not promised tomorrow. It's just another way of saying we're not promised tomorrow. And so I will consistently do that. I will consistently hunt for one of a kind experiences. And what I give up in this kind of quest to the 50, right? I've been counting down 100 days till 50. You know what I've realized about that is, I've realized that I can't tell you one thing I did in the year 2012. I, I can't. I mean, I know like how old my kids were then, and if like right off the top of my mind, right? I cannot tell you one thing I did in 2012. I can't tell you one. I know there was a presidential election that year. Uh, Barack Obama must have won. I can't tell you who won the Super Bowl, who won the NBA championship, who was in the World Series. I can't tell you who won the Masters. I can't tell you any of that stuff. And I'm a big sports guy. And to me, it means that I wasted a year of my life. Like I don't have an experience there. I literally have a notebook that I started as a result of that. That it has on every page, it has a year. And as I remember something when I did it, I'm writing it in the notebook because I don't want to forget it. And nothing comes to my mind about 2012. And so this whole never miss a moment thing is me trying to realize, preach, exemplify that we only have one life to live. And I don't want to be on my deathbed thinking, I don't want to be on my deathbed counting 2012s where there's a lot of years of my life where I can't remember anything. I want to go do stuff.
I really like that. Never miss a moment. Shoot your shot, whatever it may be, make something out of nothing. And my mantra is curiosity is currency. So if you just show up at the place you're in, cool things will come.
Great. That's a great motto. I've seen it at the top of your LinkedIn. It is just, it is so true, right? Because the more curious you are about something, the better you ask questions, like your podcast. Right? You ask great questions. You don't know what's going to come out, which means by being curious, on the other side of that could be a breakthrough moment for you. It could be a place that transcends your life. Could be like my granny's collard sandwich business.
100%.
Yeah.
And even through asking one good question, like you said, something comes of it that it changed the whole trajectory of the conversation I thought we were going to have. And that was the really cool part. And you build on it each time. Before we close here, I was curious, leading into that, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you want to leave viewers with?
I mean, I've already given the never miss a moment, right? That is like, if I could tell anybody the biggest problem we all face in our life, and some people love this, but for me, it is a little bit heartbreaking and something I'm trying to solve for, is in a hyper connective world, we are all obscure. There's very few of us that stand out that people could say, like, I can't go to California tomorrow, walk through an airport. I mean, I can, if I went to California tomorrow, walk through an airport, I could walk through obscure like I'm nobody.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's fine in that situation. But in a business where I'm trying to help people live a one of a kind life by creating a one of a kind financial plan, those future clients need me. And I have to come out of obscurity in order to do that, which means I have to work hard. If you're an entrepreneur, if you were to write the word obscurity on a sheet of paper and just how do I overcome this one obstacle, you can radically change the profit and loss statement of your business. And most people don't think about it like that. They think about like, I'll just spend money to buy leads. Well,
Mm-hmm.
then in most of those cases, all you're doing is making the lead company rich. Your brand has to come out of obscurity. The problems you solve come out of obscurity. People aren't coming in to they're not coming to meet with you to test drive you. They're coming in to buy what you have. And that's the so like I don't care what your business is, right? Solve the obscurity problem. You'll solve the revenue problem. You'll solve the I can't give my employees pay raises problem. You know, you could solve the rising cost of health insurance. You could solve the amount of taxes you owe to the IRS or whatever tax. But if you solve the obscurity problem, that solves so many other problems. And what most people do is they try to solve the other problems and not that one. So that's what I would leave your listeners with is never miss a moment. But if you're an entrepreneur, solve the problem of obscurity.
And forget if your shirt at the gym's wrinkled.
Yeah, you should definitely.